So when I got into this business and one of my friends said, "This is so stressful," I'm like, in comparison? No, it is not. But I loved the ability to think outside of the box, and all the things that I've done before have brought me and given me the foundation to be really good at what I do. And I have the heart to go into it, which I think helps me to stand out just a little bit. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, because I went through it, pardon me, a lot of us went through it when the market crashed in 2008. It was ugly, it was scary. Being in the business at the time was very scary. I was a single mom, counting pennies at the grocery store to buy food to put on the table, and didn't close a loan for 12 months. So it was a very scary time. Watched the housing market crash. People that had bought multiple houses and could get a loan, you could basically take it and throw it against the wall, and if it stuck, you could close it. Like, it was just a crazy time because there was just so much. People wanted to buy, and there were houses selling, and they were going for tens of thousands of dollars over asking price until just overnight it changed. So we have a lot of people talking that we're there again. We've been talking about us being there again. But there's a lot of things that are completely different that really aren't the same. We are not there again. If everybody is seeing it, housing prices are still going up. Why, what's the difference? We had a lot of houses, and now we have a shortage. People aren't building, people aren't selling their houses the way they were. People are afraid to put their house on the market, even if they want to buy another one. So we have a lot of contingent offers, which is difficult. And also we don't have a lot of houses being built, Before, when we had the builders, the developers out there building houses, tons and tons of houses. They build, what do they call them? Phase 1, phase 2, phase whatever. And they just keep going and going and going. And do you remember what happened back then? We had a lot of builders that just stopped building because all of a sudden they couldn't sell the houses that already had started. So the builders learned that there was no way they were going to get themselves in that situation again. So they don't build that way anymore. They build very little, and they're building smaller houses as well.
Not small enough.
Sorry?
Not small enough.
Not small enough, yeah, not cheap enough, but the housing prices are still continuing to go up, and the forecast is that we are still continuing to go up. So it's great if you own a house, it's not so bad, but it does get very difficult for people to get into the market. So in 2008 we had a surplus of homes to sell. Some of the things that occurred too, when I was in it, and some of it was easier to see after we got out of certain phases of it. One of the things that was really interesting for me going through that whole crash was I went through it before everybody else did, like within a couple of years, because as soon as the market changed, my business stopped, literally. And there was no mortgages. Our lenders would come in, lender reps from different lenders, and say, "Oh God, if their doors were still open, because they were closing like crazy, we just don't have anything. We don't have anything." And I'm like, "Then why are you here? Why are you coming into my office telling me what we don't have? Can't you come in and tell me what do you have? Because obviously you're here for a reason." And so for me, it was like, it was really tough. And so then I started looking at what can I do to help. And I actually met Margaret back then because she was a short sale specialist, and I was working in short sales, and I was working in loan modifications, and I was also focusing on non-recourse loans, showing people how to use their IRA to buy real estate. And so I met Margaret through all this, and we kind of worked together a little bit. It wasn't until she joined the group, I think it was in like 2008, something like that, when Margaret joined the group, that we started working together more frequently. But it was crazy. So I'm watching my clients, contractors were a big one. I had a lot of client contractors, and they all went out of business. The only one who stayed in business was Bob. who I met at a yard sale at my house. He joined. We had lost one of our contractors, but that guy, he just goes and goes and goes, you know. Plus being in this group, he was, you know, getting handyman work and regular work, and so he stayed in business. He was able to put food on his table. But I watched a lot of people lose their jobs, lose their money, lose their houses. It started, like I said, about over a year to 2 years after it happened to me. And I was starting to kind of, after a couple of years, things were getting better for me because I was finding other things where people had needs that I was helping them. So it was a very unique time. That's kind of a side note, but it was just very interesting watching what everybody was going through at that time, being in the business that I'm in. So one of the things, going back to the builders, they're building smaller homes. They may not be small enough, but they're noting that their clients are more interested that are buying because a smaller house equates also to smaller utilities and taxes and etc. So it's kind of important. In 2008, there's a lot of homeowners that were underwater. So when the housing market crashed and the prices were going up so crazy, I mean, it fell. I know I was trying to sell my house at the time that I had paid $500,000 for. It was up to $950,000, and I wasn't right when the market was starting to crash. I couldn't sell it fast enough because people didn't like the color of the family room, or they wanted one more bedroom. And so it went down all the way down to $525,000 in a very small amount of time. So we had a lot of people that were underwater, and then they were in really bad loans, right? And I say really bad loans because they may have been okay loans at the time. They worked for as a tool for a reason that the client was using that loan. ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages for one. Negams, well, yeah, it was a great idea, but you know, if you're not accounting for a market crash, it's okay, you know, if it's used as particularly as a tool. But now, if somebody paid $1 million for a property that's only worth half the price, maybe they put nothing down, they're really underwater, they're either in a pick-a-pay or a negam loan, or they're in an ARM, they can't refinance. And guess what happens with an ARM or a pick-a-pay? The adjustable rate mortgage, it's sometimes they were fixed for 6 months to a year, sometimes 5 even. And at the point of the adjustment, it would go up by whatever the parameters were on the loan. Usually there's a limit to it going up or down 2%, the first change. But then it just keeps going with the market, right? Where is the market? And so these people, and then they have an interest only, usually the ARMs. They were interest only, and then it would go to fully amortized, but they're still upside down. So a lot of people at that time decided, even if they could afford it, that they would just let their house go. So we had a lot of foreclosures. We had a lot of short sales because of that. Because it wasn't just, you know, I mean, we really, literally, there are so few people that are underwater right now. It is crazy to even see when somebody's underwater. Like, what situation were they in that caused them to be underwater? Because it's just not. So somebody can't pay their mortgage, or they don't want their house, they can simply put it on the market and sell it. And it is still a seller's market. It is. So that also makes it very difficult to get into a property. Yeah, that whole thing about the foreclosures too, the fact that we don't have any foreclosures right there is a really, really, really big reason why we're not going to end up in a meltdown scenario like we were before. It was terrible. It was really terrible. It was bad. We're just not there. And then let's talk about appraisals. So when the meltdown occurred, there were so many things that went into play, and I will tell you, a lot of people were blaming the loan officers for putting people in bad loans, is what they call them, but who created those loans and why did they create them? You know, if a loan officer has a loan available to a client and they want that loan, they want to buy a house with no money down or even finance 125% of the value of the home, which was actually going on. A client needs that product. Why are we not to give them that product? You know, we weren't seeing, I wasn't seeing any signs that we were, you know, that we were going to be going through what we did. So, so there's a lot of things and interesting shows and series that you can watch that talks about the big banking, you know, and what happens. There's a lot of things, but nonetheless, the fact is we had loans we put clients into, it didn't work at all for a meltdown, and a lot of people lost their homes either by choice or, you know, in some cases, unfortunately, it wasn't even right away, because if their interest only or their payment was low and they could afford it at the time, but they couldn't afford it if it doubled, if their payment doubled, then they had no choice and they were losing their houses. So it was very sad. Some lenders were working with them and some were not. So while today's buyers are coping with the rising home prices and interest rates, and we know they're bad, we'll talk about that a little bit too, the current supply versus demand situation is proof that there's no crash on the horizon. So it's, you know, I'm glad there's not. I don't want to see a crash. You know, are we coming into a recession or not? You know, it depends on who you listen to. We've been coming into it for a really long time. It's just crazy. Appraisals. What happened, one of the millions of things that happened in 2008 is we as loan officers used to be able to pick our own appraiser, send them out to the property, go, hey, I have this client, maybe they want to refinance, can you give me an idea of value? But there was a lot of loan officers that were forcing their appraisers to appraise the property, or they wouldn't use them. And some even buying them out, and who knows what. There's a lot of icky stuff that goes on, right? Yeah. And so the homes were getting appraised. Nowadays, they put a barrier, so they call this AMC, Appraisal Management Company, that we have to hire through the lender that we choose. And we order the appraisal through the AMC, and they pick the appraiser. We cannot talk to them at all. Sometimes if we just have a little question, but it's like we shouldn't even call the appraiser, because we could get in a lot of trouble. We could literally lose our license over speaking to the appraiser. So the appraised value is what the appraiser determines the appraised value to be, right? So there's nothing we can do. If we see a lot of issues with it, sure, we can go and do a rebuttal and say, hey, I don't agree with all these things, and here's all the reasons why, and it's a lot of fun. But the thing is this also is a really good thing, because when the appraisers are going out and appraising properties, particularly in a sale, that's the value. That is supported by comps of other homes similar to that home that have sold, with nobody interfering in that. That keeps prices from, I know, ridiculously going up, but I mean, we've seen them go up a lot because we have a shortage. We've had a shortage of homes, especially before the rates went up. When the rates went up, we had people saying, you know what, forget it. There were two things occurred both at the same time. They were sick and tired of having multiple bids and having to go tens of thousands to 100 or more thousand over asking price just to get into a house. And then the rates went up, boom, overnight practically. And so we had some people leaving because they couldn't get in contract, they were tired of it, and some because of the rates. Maybe they couldn't qualify, maybe they just were, you know, starstruck by the twos or even the ones that were out there for a while. People are starting to get a little over that now, because especially some of us who are older that have seen much higher rates. It's the younger generation that really is having a hard time, because that's what it's like, oh look, this is normal. To them it's normal. It's not normal to the rest of us. But I put some numbers together once, and I thought it was really, you know, sometimes I don't really know what the best answer is to something until I do a little table and say, okay, let's do some comparisons. So if you were to buy a house at, that was listed at 600,000, but you had to pay 660 to get it at a lower rate, at the time. Or you get to now pay 600 for that house at a higher rate, and then now you get the 600,000, not the 660, so you saved on the purchase. So your payment might be a little bit higher right now, but then when you get to refinance later down the road, your payment's gonna be lower than it would have been even at a lower rate. So is it better to wait? I wouldn't. I'd rather have the house for a better price than to pay that much over asking, because I can always refinance. Unlike rent, I can always refinance and get a better payment. So many things to say. Just a little difference, because I think it's interesting and I realize a lot of people don't realize this. When you're having an appraisal done for a purchase or refinance, that appraisal is going to look potentially different, because when you're refinancing your house and we send the appraiser out, there's no contract. The appraiser doesn't know what we think the value is worth. So they go and they appraise the property based on the comps. When you're buying a house, we have a contract. The appraiser has to have a copy of the contract. They want to see everything. Are there seller credits? Like what's going into the numbers, what you're purchasing, and then try to see if there's comps that will support the purchase price, not just of homes that have sold, but what's on the market. What is the price, asking price? How long has it been on the market? So to see in both sections if it is supported. So you could very easily get a higher appraised value for a property you're selling than one that you're refinancing because of that. I just think it's very interesting. A lot of people don't realize that. They're like, my house is worth this much. Well, we have to see what the appraiser comes up with. Okay, I am 1 minute from my 20-minute mark, so questions, anyone? Lee.
I have 3 questions, so maybe you won't get to it. When people came to your office and said, we don't have anything, what does that mean?
Loans. We have no loans that we can offer you. Yeah. So, makes no sense to me. They're coming in, they're a rep for a certain lender, right, a wholesale lender that we can broker to. But they're coming in telling me that they don't have any type of loans that they can sell. I'm like, well then why are you here?
Meaning the wholesaler wasn't lending?
That particular wholesaler didn't have a loan product
Got it.
that they could offer.
My next question is, when you talk about smaller homes, how small is too small? And what is kind of like dividing line for what that really means?
Oh boy, it really depends. Michelle, is that a good question for you?
How small is, I mean, now with the additions that you can put on your property, I've heard that even 500 square feet, it's okay, 300 square feet. Yeah,
Those are
I
tiny
mean,
houses.
yeah,
Tiny houses.
like really tiny houses. That's not a choice. I mean, for the new generation, who live with their parents.
I totally understand. My last question is, do you think Zillow is accurate?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Sometimes. Okay, so let me tell you my take, and it depends. Sometimes, so I look at it just to get an idea, but where the home is a big difference. So if you're in Empire Ranch, in a housing development, all the houses are little cookie cutters, it's a better idea than if you live in the country. It has no idea. But then if improvements were made, Zillow typically doesn't know, like, was there a pool? No, and you added one? Well, it doesn't know, but a pool doesn't necessarily give you any value. And if it does, it's up to 10 or 20,000 depending on the appraiser. So it just really depends. It's just an idea. It is not a value.
So the follow-up is, we have a house that's every house was custom made with an architect.
Yeah.
But they're all roughly the same size on roughly the same lot. Would that apply? How would Zillow understand that?
It probably really wouldn't, because your specs are going to be really important then, and the homes that have sold, preferably within a 6-month period, it's really better to contact a realtor and get some,
Very good. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, I am done. Thank you, everyone, for having me.